Hello and welcome to the Dyno Six Pack Dynasty Football Podcast. This past week, or last 2 weeks really, has brought a lot of change across the quarterback landscape. So I got my buddy Keith Flemming here today to kind of help break that down with me. And we're going to kind of talk about what it means for the Dynasty relevant players. It's not like, it's a lot of teams where the quarterback goes down and it doesn't matter. We got guys like Justin Jefferson, Bijan Robinson, Devontae Adams, like some big names that are having some big impacts. They're going to have to kind of deal with these next few weeks. But before we get into all that, Keith, how are you doing today?
I've been better.
Yeah.
As a Falcons fan, rough 24 hours. But to your point, if people do not play DFS and are listening to this is one of the main reasons that I pivoted to DFS a few years ago. Is that you don't have to deal with all this shit. It's week to week. You can have whoever you want on your lineup. Yeah, you might have an injury in a game that hurts you for that slate, but you can do a showdown later. You can do an afternoon slate, or the next week you can go whoever you want. So it's one of the reasons I really like DFS. I have really gotten into Dynasty in the last couple of years because I like it. Because again, it's not a one season deal. You're not all in on just one season at a time. But it really is. This madness is just, to me, a great ad for what me, Chris, Dave, and Joe do, which is the DFS stuff of. You don't have to deal with this crap. You really don't. You just, week to week and try to get your best lineup you can.
Well, speaking of crap, before we get into it, make sure you guys head over to fantasy6pack.net/plans, become a member over there. You get access to our rankings, our betting, DFS projections, like Keith is mentioning here. You get access to our Discord forum where you can come ask us questions that are directly tailored to the settings in your leagues and we'll help you out. Fantasy6pack.net/plans, come on, be a member and hang out with us. We're going to be talking about, like we said, some quarterback changes and then wrapping up with some underperforming wide receivers that kind of went rounds 2 through 4 in startup drafts for Dynasty League this past year, and just kind of lessons that we could take away from that. Like mentioned, or Keith mentioned, you don't have to deal with much of crap, but unfortunately with fantasy you do. So starting with crap and Arthur Smith and the Atlanta Falcons. So as a Falcons fan, what were just kind of your first impressions of this offense with Taylor Heineke under center instead of Desmond Ridder?
I'm a big Harry Potter fan, and I keep telling people dark times
yes
are amongst the Atlanta Falcons, for a franchise that we've been pretty tortured. I know a lot of people don't want to hear, people say that their franchise has it worse than others, but I've always argued that, for the Lions and the Browns and these teams that they're not really in contention, they're consistently bad. At least you know what you get there, to where yesterday was just another example of what it is to be a Falcons fan, of just, the minute you think there's hope, it's just like Charlie Brown in that football, they just take it away. But I don't, it's hard to get into anything with Taylor Heineke, because until Arthur Smith is fired, which I am 100% on board with that now, I don't know what you can expect from this Falcons team. I'm actually embarrassed at myself for really being in on Bijan this week in DFS. Unfortunately, I talked Dave Eddy into it as well. I had tons of reasoning and data and stuff behind it. It's, what I do. 24% of Heineke's passes for his career go to running backs. And if you look yesterday, 8 targets went to running backs, but they only threw it 4 times to Bijan. None of them looked like they were design plays. They were more just, he was in the flat, they threw it to him. And Arthur Smith just, some people want to say, well, he just, he's not tailoring to the fantasy community. That's bullshit. Like any team that is successful in the NFL, they get the balls to their best players. And it's almost like a
That's
brazen
not a fantasy thing.
Right. Yeah. It's almost like a brazen thing at this point, where he's like, I'm smarter than everybody else, so I'm going to win without force feeding, these talented players. And I was somebody who, very vocal on the record, that we screwed up immediately in taking Bijan. Not anything against Bijan the player, but just he's a position that's not valuable. Like, it's just not. You can't pay running backs. It's a luxury. We're not a team that's anywhere near winning the Super Bowl. And then, oh, by the way, there was a can't miss generational defensive talent. They can get pressure, who grew up, played college football in your home state, and you saw him several times in that stadium.
Dominate.
And we're like, nah, we'll pass on him. We don't need him. Which, by the way, the Falcons' average time that quarterbacks have to throw, we're 31st out of 32 teams. So that pressure might help a little bit. But I still think Heineke overall could be a benefit to this team because they proved again yesterday they moved the ball. Ritter moved the ball really well. It was the turnovers that were really causing the issues. Now, the problem is outside of Drake London, who he's really their only true receiver. So when he plays, it seems like he doesn't have the same issues that, Pitts and, Bijan do. I can't in good faith, recommend to anybody anymore that you should, think Bijan's going to have a good week or Pitts is going to have a good week. I don't care how good the matchup is or what the situation is, because if there was ever a week to force feed Pitts and force feed Bijan, it was last week. And Pitts had 6 targets, which that's about what he's been averaging this season. They definitely didn't force it to him anymore. He made by far the 2 best plays of the game from an offensive standpoint, other than Jonnu Smith's 60-yard touchdown run. He made 2 unbelievable catches. So, you would think they would get the ball to him. And then with Bijan, he fumbled, and it sucked. It was after his best run of the day. He doesn't have a history of fumbling. I think that was his first fumble on the season. And Smith basically put him in the doghouse after that. I think he saw 2 touches the rest of the game after that. I mean, this was early in the second half. So you just can't trust Arthur Smith to do what any other coach I feel like in the NFL would do, which is my GM and my owner has given me 3 really talented players the last 3 years in the top 8 picks of the first round. And yet I'm not going to make any real effort to force feed them the ball.
Yeah, it's kind of baffling to kind of just be like an unbiased observer of it. Just it's like you said, it's almost like Arthur Smith would rather win his way or rather lose his way to prove a point than win and let the analyst be
his
right.
Background has a lot to do with that. I really believe that. For those that don't know, his dad basically founded FedEx.
Yep.
His dad's worth $5.4 billion. There's estimates that Arthur, with inheritance and stocks and all the stuff he has, he's worth probably about $1 billion. So he does have the ability that very few coaches would to, it doesn't really matter if he gets fired or he can't get it. Right. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't want to take anything away from him. He's worked very hard, and I admire that, he went into a profession. He didn't follow his dad's footsteps. He could have had a much easier life than what he's done. But I do think that that's where you get that brazenness and, the way he's so dismissive to, journalists when they ask very fair questions or when he's had interaction with fans, is that he doesn't need it. And he knows that. And it's like, at the end of the day, I'm going to be filthy rich. And worst case, if I got blackballed from the NFL, oh, well, I'll go live on a beach, and drink daiquiris or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I do envy him in that sense. But kind of getting back to just the football side of it. So for fantasy at this point, I feel like at this point, Tyler Algier to a small extent, but definitely Jonnu Smith, I think they're going to be relevant factors for fantasy the rest of the way. You look at what Jonnu Smith did yesterday. You mentioned that long touchdown pass. That's not that's a rare thing for him. You flash back to his days in Tennessee. He had several times where he would catch it and go 50+ yards and just outrun cornerbacks and safeties. I mean, that dude can move.
If he wasn't on a team with Kyle Pitts, people would be saying, man, Jonnu Smith's a freak athlete, because he is. It's just he's not the same kind of freak athlete that Kyle Pitts is. And Algier, that was something that I got right all summer, and a lot of people were looking at me were crazy. Was I couldn't believe people were taking Bijan in the first round of fantasy drafts, because I knew how good Algier was, and there was no way that they were just going to go away from him. And the big thing for me, and this was what scared me the most, was last year from inside the 5, he scored on 50% of his runs. So it's hard to say, even if a guy is a top 8 pick. I actually understand Arthur Smith from this standpoint, that if I have a back that's more physical in the goal line area and is that successful, why would I, take the ball away from him? I understand that. I don't understand, though, sometimes the way that a player like Bijan, you just can't give a guy a carry once every 6-7 plays and expect even a freak athlete like Bijan to be able to get into a rhythm. I think running back is much like quarterback and a lot of other positions, that they have to get fed the ball in order to truly do what they do, kind of figure out the defense on the fly, figure out what can I do here, or, where can I attack it? And it's a mess, but I knew that Algier was going to be a focal point, and it is something to really pay attention to this week. So if Algier's out there in your standard leagues, I would go pick him up. It was definitely noticeable how little Bijan played after the fumble. And it could be a deal, knowing Arthur Smith, he's just like, look, I'm going to go forward with Algier being the lead back, and then Bijan basically just go into the Algier role, which is Bijan's been, slightly out-touching Algier up to this point, and maybe those roles just reverse.
Man, that's just crazy to me.
I know,
it's crazy that we're here.
But it's also why take Bijan? And I didn't understand it was we had Algier, who 1,000-yard rusher. If you watch him
at the 6th round,
he runs so hard. Like he's a back you love to have, especially for Arthur Smith offense. Like he's the perfect type of. He's very physical, like Derrick Henry type guy, right? Like he wants to. Right. He's going to bring the hit to you, not allow you to hit him. And then Cordell is still a decent back. Like when he's got in the game, you see Cordell is still manageable. Like he could still be an NFL running back, and that's why it's just again baffling why we took Bijan in the first place. But it makes no sense to then make the pick and then not make him a focal point of your offense. But we should have seen it coming because, again, Kyle Pitts had the second best tight end season by a rookie in the history of the NFL. And in the 2 years since, he has not been a focal point at any point in this offense.
Yeah, it's been frustrating. Like I cashed out on him a couple weeks ago after he had a couple big games in a few dynasty leagues, and it hurt because I invested so much. But it just looking back on it, man, like one trade I got like Josh Downs and Jonathan Mingo. It's just even with the Downs injury, it's just like, man, I'm glad I made that switch. But okay, so Heinicke here, he looked okay. Like the offense moved the ball kind of like we thought. Do you think we see Desmond Ridder again this year at all, or do you think that it's the chapter on him is kind of done from a dynasty perspective and real life perspective?
I don't know if it's done yet. I think that would be a little premature. I mean, he had only made, I think, 11 starts. And again, what was crazy is you can't take away the turnovers. I understand that. But the last 3 weeks before the Tennessee game, he was top 3 in EPA per play, explosive plays. I mean, there was some data out there that was very encouraging. The issue was obviously he fumbled the ball 4 times and had 3 picks in 10 quarters. I mean, you can't do that in the NFL. And I understand with us being in the playoff hunt, you got to go to something more steady. Like while we're in this hunt, I think Heinicke is going to probably, unless he just plays really bad, be the quarterback the rest of the way. But as a fan, I would say that if the minute we're out of playoff, you might as well give Ridder a little bit more rope and see what else you got. Because obviously if we're out of playoff contention, we're going to probably be in that top 10 area in the draft. There's some really good quarterbacks coming out. And you got to kind of decide what are you going to do because, turnovers is something you can fix. And, the fact that we were moving the ball with Ridder was encouraging. He's just got to learn that the number one priority of a quarterback, especially a young one that's not asked to do a ton, is you can't hurt the team by just giving the ball, to your opponent.
Yeah, I mean, he's a tough one right now for Dynasty. Like, I feel like you can't really sell him just because the value is absolute rock bottom right now. So you kind of just have to hold. But yeah, I'm with you. I think that we see him again this year. We know what Taylor Heinicke is. He's exciting. He's a guy's guy. I mentioned like the guys rally around him, but like he's still like a backup quarterback. So if you do have him on a dynasty team, I definitely still hold on to him. If you have a taxi squad spot, you can throw first and second year guys on, throw them on there, and just kind of see what happens. But switching over to the other side of the ball, or the other sideline in this game, Minnesota Vikings also going through quarterback changes, but the narrative is a lot different.
Can I just say something too, real quick before we do this? The most Falcons thing ever is we got this great deal where we're playing this quarterback, Ryan, who's 25, making his first start. There was no way they would have beat us with him in. And if we didn't knock him out, we would have never seen Dobbs. I don't care how bad the game got. They had made the decision they were not going to play Dobbs. And in the most Falcons things possible, we knocked the dude out to where they had no choice. And literally in the text thread with me, my dad, and my buddies, all Falcons fans, the second that happened, we're like, oh, we're screwed. Because we knew that Dobbs was talented enough that now it's going to be a game and we would find a way of losing. And that's exactly what happened. But it's just the most Falcons thing ever that he would have never even seen the field if we wouldn't unfortunately knock their quarterback out.
I mean, Dobbs at this point, man, he's officially a dude. Like, I can't help but root for that guy.
Yeah, sure.
So, like, the main question that I kind of had circled here before we came in, we weren't expecting to have any data to kind of go off of. We were expecting to see, like you said, that Jaren Hall start. was kind of, can Dobbs keep this offense rolling in Minnesota like he did in Arizona? And I mean, the dude, like you said, 5 days in, they were literally having to like hand feed him plays and like
there was players' names. It's unbelievable.
They were asking him in a thing, and like he was having to like look over, and I guess like he was like asking Jordan Addison, like, all right, so what routes do you guys run on that side? Okay, what about this side? Okay, cool, let's go get it. And the dude just keeps winning, man. It's incredible. So I mean, I think we're probably both on the same page here. Like, I think this Vikings offense, it's not going to be the Kirk Cousins level, but I think it's still going to be fantasy relevant for the Hawkinsons, the Jordan Addisons, Justin Jefferson, if we see him again. Are you kind of on that same page, or do you think this is more of a case of like there's just not a lot of film of him in this system, so we'll see it kind of come back to earth a little bit there?
I mean, you have to take a grain of salt because it was against Falcons. That's obviously the first thing I got to put out there. But no, I think that I'm actually the opposite, that with like Addison, I would be trying to go get him in dynasty leagues if you weren't already, because now you not only have him going forward, because obviously the situation will get better. They're going to keep Jefferson, so he's going to always have another receiver on the other side who is going to take so much attention away. But now this season's not shot, and he's still going to be viable the rest of the way. And I will admit the Akers injury really stinks for the Vikings, because I think he was their better back. Not that they were running a lot, but I think he could have at least given them a little bit more of an option. I think with a running quarterback too, it just makes it a little easier for the run game to get going. But I really like Dobbs the rest of the way as fantasy quarterback, because look what he did in Arizona, especially those weeks that James Conner was still healthy. And that was with Conner, Marquise Brown and Zach Ertz. Hawkinson, Addison, and potentially Jefferson is a huge upgrade. And I also think O'Connell's a good coach and a good offensive mind. And I'm excited to see what they do with him. I'm very high on. I think this Vikings team could end up making some noise in the NFC that is wide open, because their defense is really good all of a sudden. Like if you look the last 5 weeks, they've stayed in games. But I love Addison, obviously in dynasty leagues, I'd be going to get. And if you have Hawkinson and you're like, man, this season's over, man, now, he threw to tight ends a lot in Arizona. Ertz obviously got a ton of targets. And again, Hawkinson's a huge upgrade on Ertz.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Jordan Addison was a guy I highlighted on my contending and rebuilding trade targets show that I did last week. He was kind of one of the few guys that I highlighted that was interesting, because I was like, I don't think it matters whether you're a contender or a rebuilder. He's a guy you should go trade for, because he's going to be helpful in either situation. He's quarterback proof. He's a stud. Josh Dobbs, man, he's fun to watch. I agree with you. It's crazy. Even just 2 weeks ago, if you would have asked me, put the odds that we see Justin Jefferson in a Vikings uniform again, and I would have said it's probably at best 50-50. And like you said, the season's not shot now. There's a reason for him most likely to come back in a few weeks. I could see him coming back, and I feel pretty good about them retaining him long term. So long term here, how high of a ceiling do you think Jordan Addison is? And the one other thing I kind of want to touch on just before I forget is I wanted to comment on how crazy deep the quarterback position is. Not only do we have the Josh Dobbs that are coming in, Taylor Heinicke is relevant. A couple of years ago, we see Cooper Rush step in and go 5-1 while Dak's out. It's crazy how deep, Gardner Minshew is looking good this year. The quarterback position is deep, and there's a lot of good quarterbacks coming in next year.
It is, but don't you think, you're the dynasty expert, would you not give a king's ransom for a CJ Stroud, to have, because you're right, it's very deep, but there's also that small group of guys that are that high tier above. And if you can get say Stroud, maybe some people don't believe in it yet. I'm sorry, from what you've seen,
I think 14 touchdowns, 6 or 7 in my ranks.
Yeah,
man.
I mean, to me, I'd even have him higher than that because of his age. He's only going to get better. I don't even know if Nico Collins is a true number one receiver.
In my
Nico Collins.
Tank Dell is though. In my rankings, I have Stroud right behind Herbert and Lamar. Would you agree with that, or would you take him over?
I would have him above Herbert. I really would. Lamar, no, because Lamar is just the fantasy cheat code, and I think that, man, it's going to be fun. I think that we're really finally going to see what Lamar can be, and you see what's happening this season. You're unleashing him, which it's kind of surprising they didn't do it before, but Herbert. I don't know, man. At some point, it's just some of it's got to be Herbert. It seems like he gets more excuses than it's like the anti-Dak, right? Where Dak gets blamed for everything in Dallas, and Herbert gets every single excuse for the Chargers not winning or him not, closing games or, whatever it may be. And I think Stroud, Herbert's been behind a better offensive line. He's had better weapons. And I mean, Stroud's already, just putting up crazy numbers, and it's the throws he's making that are just, like that touchdown throw, the second one to Schultz, and then also the one to Dell were just, absolute dimes. And again, they have 4 offensive line, right, still that were not proposed starter at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
I believe. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
You can tell in the running game, they nobody, doesn't matter if it's Pierce, Singletary, they can't get anything going there. With the ball placement from CJ Stroud, I was kind of searching back on some of my old CJ Stroud tweets that I just kind of see what I had. And there was a tweet back in March that Fantasy Pros said, who's your quarterback one in this class? And I said, it's CJ Stroud. And just because of the ball placement on almost every damn throw, my lights just came back, is just like money. And we're just seeing that translate right over. We have a crazy ass windstorm going on outside, so I'm hoping I don't lose the internet here. But yeah.
Where are you in? You're out in
Oregon. I'm about an hour off the Oregon coast.
Okay, cool.
So we're getting a little bit of a storm right now, but yeah, we're seeing that translate. That ball placement just doesn't matter if he's under pressure, if he's having to move and create extend plays. He's a dude, man. CJ Stroud's the guy. But getting back over here to the Vikings here.
Yeah.
So Jordan Addison, obviously, he's shown that it doesn't matter with Justin Jefferson there or not, he's going to produce. How high do you think his ceiling is for fantasy? Do you think he's more just kind of one of those wide receiver 2s like McLaurin, DK Metcalf that are going to be more likely wide receiver 2s with those big weeks? Or do you think that it could be like a Devonta Smith, AJ Brown situation where there's years where they both finish top 12?
That's exactly where I was going. Now, granted, I think he does need Cousins to be the quarterback, or an equal quarterback, I should say, 2 Cousins for them both to be there. But the reason I would be so high on Addison is you don't know about Jefferson, right? So if Jefferson does come back, it's not necessarily bad for Addison. It's just obviously he's not going to get as many targets, but he should get more quality targets, right? Because again, teams are not, you can't, double cover both of them. And obviously Jefferson will be double covered at all times. But if he, say they do get rid of Jefferson, now all of a sudden you got a guy that is a second-year dude, and he is the unquestioned number 1 receiver that they're going to build around and force feed the ball to, who, by the way, they have no running backs as of right now. So, I don't see this offense, changing to a running team in the next couple of years. It's going to take a while to make that kind of move.
Not unless
I really do believe Cousins is coming back, don't you? Because Jefferson has even said that.
If Rodgers is going to come back this year, I don't see why he wouldn't come back next year. I don't feel like any team's going to want to go throw a lot of money or a high draft pick to go acquire him coming off his Achilles. So I think it makes sense for everybody. Kirk, the Vikings, it makes the most sense. Just come back here, rehab when you're ready to go. Just, step
Where are
back
you going to
in.
get better weapons? He's got Hawkinson, Jefferson, Addison. Wow. You can't ask for much more as a quarterback.
Yeah, crazy, man. It's crazy you can lose a quarterback to your Achilles and then a week later still have just so much positivity around your team. A team, that does not have quite the positivity and a little bit more question marks, and that is the Vegas Raiders right now. They just benched Jimmy Garoppolo. Switched to the rookie Aiden O'Connell, who had some flashes in preseason that, gave you reason to be excited. And, I saw some people even then that were just like, are we sure he's not better than Jimmy G right now? And it felt a little hot takey at the time, but, a few weeks in, it's just same old Jimmy G. This offense wasn't very great. It was good for Jacoby Myers fantasy wise. Devontae Adams was a bit up and down. You could see the frustration there. But what are kind of your first thoughts on Aiden O'Connell's start? My general takeaways was, he looked competent. They moved the ball. It's definitely not as explosive as it could be, even with like a Jimmy G when he's in there. But overall, I came away impressed from a real football perspective. I'm a little unsure if it's going to be good for the wide receivers fantasy value there moving forward. But what are your just kind of thoughts, that first thought seeing Aiden O'Connell, and just kind of general thoughts, general takeaways?
I wouldn't take a lot from this game because it was just such a mess. The poor Giants, man. This has been, God almighty, what a horrible season for that franchise. It seems like every time they kind of get, something going this year, it's just more bad news. But, he looked fine. It's just he's such a young quarterback. You got to remember that first game versus the Chargers, he was sacked 7 times. They did a good job, obviously, getting rid of the ball quicker, but the Giants also had just traded away one of their best pass rushers. They weren't really in a pass, situation a lot. Like they were able to really run the ball and control it and mix up their play calling, which I don't know if there's going to be a lot of that this season because, who knows how many times the Raiders are going to be up the rest of the way.
Yeah.
But I am with you that I think I have a lot of hope for him as an NFL quarterback. I would not be ecstatic, though, if I had Jacoby Myers or Devontae Adams, because I just think that as much as, I know Jimmy G drives you crazy, he's always been able to put up, big numbers for his number one or even number two receivers.
Right. He can sustain
exactly.
for sure.
And we got to see that with O'Connell. So it might be a deal with, especially with Myers, I might be looking, maybe somebody I can get something of value for him because it looks like this is what the Raiders are doing, right? Like O'Connell is going to be that guy. I would think not just to the end of this year, but maybe even, next year, because I know they're really high on him and they're just trying to start that early to where Adams, I just, to me in Dynasty, you get a guy like that, he could get traded. He's already, made some rumblings and stuff. I'm never letting go of somebody like that when they're still in their prime, unless I'm just getting an absolute ridiculous ransom back. And I don't think you're going to get that right now in this situation.
No, I mean, Devontae Adams, we need to get you back on for another trade show here in the next week or two, because we've had just like a flurry of trades that have came in. Teams like in my dynasty leagues right now are really kind of starting to commit to the rebuild or commit to competing. I saw Devontae Adams get dealt for Rashee Rice, Quentin Johnson, and Michael Mayer right before everything imploded. And it was, right before everything imploded there. And now it's just looking away. I'm just like, man, that's just a great trade for the team that got the Rashee Rice side right now. Like, especially if you're looking to, that was a rebuilding trade. And
I still don't know though, long term. You know what I mean? Like that's one of those deals that, in the second it does, but it's like I feel like Devontae Adams has probably got like at least 2-3 more like elite years left. To where,
do you think they'll be here though? Do you think that it happens here in Vegas and Aiden O'Connell's the quarterback the next 2 years?
Oh, I think it could. Like I said, the rest of the year I don't feel good, but I don't care. I mean, I think Adams has proved it doesn't matter who his freaking quarterback is. Once they understand, how to be an NFL quarterback, I just think it's unfair for O'Connell this year to kind of if he ends up having a good year and Adams has good numbers the rest of the way, that's extremely encouraged. But if it's not, it's not a naysay on O'Connell. This is a mess. You got to remember, whole new coaching staff, right? Like they fired their coach, they fired their GM. Like it's not a good situation for a rookie, and that's why I would just temper expectations for everything. But I just think Adams is that talented of a guy, and he's so good at getting open that he's going to make it work. I think just about anywhere.
All right, so let's try and get in a hypothetical situation here. Let's say you're running a dynasty team here. You're the number one seed right now. You got like a 2-game lead. You're feeling pretty good. You're pretty much in the playoffs, and you're most likely getting a first round bye there. And you have Devontae Adams at this point. Are you looking to try and offload him before the deadline and get some more pieces that you might feel better contributing this year? Or is it one of those you buy the talent, you hope that he gets hot in the playoffs, and you want him back next year to try and run that title back?
I would honestly hold on to him because again, I think that it's more likely that it's going to get better as it goes, right? Like you would think that they're going to continue to get more of a connection as the season goes on. And the other big thing is, I talk about this all the time in DFS. I love having receivers, especially talented ones, on bad teams because you're down and you're chucking a lot, and garbage points count just as much as regular points. And I could see, the last 4 or 5 games of the season, Devontae Adams putting up some really big numbers when the Raiders are probably just basically tanking. I mean, if we're being honest, right? Like they're just trying to get a high draft pick for next year, but that doesn't mean he can't put up some huge numbers. I mean, obviously each trade, we've talked about this before, it's situational, right? You got to know exactly what am I getting? What's the situation? But overall, I would not be looking to move Adams unless I am a team that's in a complete rebuild. And, not only is this year a wash, but probably next year as well. And you're looking like
which you should have moved him 2 weeks ago if that's the case.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So in this game here, Josh Jacobs, currently sitting at RB10 on the year coming into the week, had a pretty good week, had a heavy workload this year. Do you think that that's going to be a trend that we see more with O'Connell in the center? Or do you think it was just kind of a game script where they were just kicking their ass and they were just kind of just really feeding it, trying to control the clock there?
The big winners in fantasy leagues of this move is Josh Jacobs owners. You look at that first Chargers game. He had 9 targets and caught 7 passes. He is going to be used a lot, whether it be in the passing game, the run game, whatever. Again, rookie quarterback, when they get in the red zone, they're not going to be throwing a lot. They're going to be running it. That's good for Jacobs. He's a situation in Dynasty where obviously if I'm rebuilding, I would honestly, maybe wait a week or two, see if
he's not even that old either. Like, I think
Right.
he's still 24, maybe 25 already this year.
and
But
on
like,
a 1 year deal, so he could end up anywhere, right? Like next year.
mhm,
But like if I'm rebuilding, I would be trying to get value for him because he
sure.
should be a
Mhm.
very valuable piece the rest of the way if he stays healthy. But man, if you're like even just on the edge of playoff contention, you may have just got like a top 7-8 running back the rest of the way, especially with the way running back position has been this year.
Mhm.
And it just kind of fell in your lap because he's going to get more usage. And I actually think, I don't know, it's just something about him that I think that he feels like, more like this is my offense, kind of like last year, right? Like where he really was like the offense and he thrived. And then this year, it's weird with not really a ton changing. He's, made such a regression when I don't necessarily think, Carr is that much better than Garoppolo. So I just, again, he's going to be involved a lot in the passing game and they're going to give him plenty of opportunities to run the ball. I like Jacobs a lot the rest of the season.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. He's going to be 20 plus carries every single week moving forward here. Kicking it over to that other sideline though, with the Giants. Like we mentioned earlier, this season was going rough. It pretty much went from bad to worst case scenario. And then adding to that, they had that the offenses looked better with Tyrod Taylor under center. You have to, for one, wonder, is this like an addition by subtraction type thing this year? Two, that contract looked rough before this injury. You add that uncertainty now. And then third
it's
thing.
It's not as bad, though, as everybody thinks. Like, it's actually, I think after next year, it's pretty manageable that they can cut bait.
I don't know. You have that, and then you have to wonder if they could go back 2 weeks ago now if they would have looked to go a little harder to sell Saquon for value at the trade deadline. Because, now you're sitting 2-7.
I didn't understand why they didn't do that anyway.
You're wasting the franchise tag year on Saquon.
I agree.
What the hell do the Giants do here for from the real life perspective and like your players in Dynasty, like outside of Saquon, like what are you doing with these guys?
It's a mess. I mean, it really is. And I hate it because I do still think Daboll is one of the better coaches in the NFL, young coaches. I mean, I keep telling people, everybody's like, look at the record and everything. I'm like, they had an unbelievably brutal schedule to start the season. Mm-hmm. And then since then, it's just been injury. But I mean, they should have traded Barkley. I didn't understand why they didn't, especially there were several contenders that I'm sure they could at least get like a second rounder or something for him. Mm-hmm. I don't know why they didn't get rid of him. They had already basically said they weren't going to pay him. They had made that decision. That's why they had the long battle. They ended up doing the franchise tag. So why not get something for him? But I do think Barkley's going to, again, for the rest of the season, the real winner are Saquon Barkley owners, the people that have, gone through hell the first 8-9 weeks. As now it's like we've seen in Tyrod Taylor in the games he's played, he's done just fine. I mean, even yesterday, he did fine, right? Mm-hmm. Even with Danny DeVito at quarterback. So he's going to be okay. But, man, I do, say that this stinks for like Wan'Dale Robinson, who somebody was talking about on the DFS show yesterday, who had just been such a great play week after week on DFS with Daniel Jones. But for whatever reason, the games with Tyrod Taylor, he didn't get, any targets. I don't know if that changes, moving forward, but now you can't trust any receivers. Obviously, I wouldn't want the quarterback. Darren Waller's season is, officially done if it wasn't already. And basically it's Barkley or bust. That's it for, fantasy stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like from a dynasty perspective, there's like half of me that's like, for the price, like Jalen Hyatt and Wan'Dale Robinson are kind of interesting buys, but then the other side of me is just like, I feel like this Giants team is going to look completely different next year. I think that they surprisingly found out that having a wide receiver one be a 32-year-old tight end that's injured all the time is not the optimal strategy for success when you're trying to develop a young quarterback. So I feel like they're going to invest in the skill position players there just to make it a little bit easier there. But what are your thoughts there? Do you think there's anything for Hyatt or Wan'Dale long term, or do you think that it's just kind of if you can get a few games out of them this year, good, and then look to sell?
I really like Hyatt long term. Obviously, it'd be nice to know he's got a quarterback. I do keep saying, and this is why, it looks like Jones will probably still be the guy next year. Hyatt is the perfect receiver for him. Like Jones's numbers historically are very good on deep balls. And Jalen Hyatt is, I think, eventually going to be one of the true
I would not have guessed that.
Threats. Yeah, I know. It's shocking. It really is. Like Joe Matz, who, does the Thursday show, and he's a huge Giants fan. And we first started doing the show together, he made that comment, and I was like, Joe, come on, don't lie to me. And literally he sent me all this stuff on it. And I'm like, holy cow, I would have never guessed that. But yeah, he is. With the exception of one season, he's been like in the top 10 on deep throws in the NFL. And there was a 2-year stretch where he was actually, I think, number 2 quarterback in the league on deep throws. So Hyatt is somebody that I do have value in. Wan'Dale Robinson, I just don't know. Like, I thought they were going to use him differently than they have. Like, I was really high on him when they took him there because it seemed like, okay, Daboll's got a plan, right? Like, maybe he's going to be like the Miko Hardman or something where he'll get like, 3-4 carries and then, also more involved in passing
touches
and and it's just really, he's just been a slot receiver. So, I mean, he's, again, for DFS, I like it because he does seem to get, a guaranteed 8-9 points each week, which in that 3K range is great, but I just don't really see a ceiling on him. And this franchise is just such a mess now all of a sudden. It's a shame because, hopes were so high not even a year ago. And now a year later, it's like Waller is basically a bust. You're going to have to get rid of Barkley, and you didn't get anything for him. You got to basically go with Jones one more year. And then outside of Hyatt and, Robinson, like, what else is there on the offensive side of the ball? I mean, it's almost like they're going to have to do another rebuild, which is just, I'm sure, not what anybody wants to hear.
Yeah, I mean, nobody except Cowboys fans want to hear that.
That's right, yeah. I probably enjoyed it for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. And then it's tough because, it's not like it's week 1 and Daniel Jones is going down. So he's probably optimistic to start the year next year. Yeah. You're going to get like a little bit of a cup of coffee at the end of the year, and who knows if he's even fully healthy. Like, I just don't know what they're even really going to be able to take away from it next year. It's an ugly spot to be a Giants fan. And I know if you are a Giants fan, it probably feels like everything's just craving on you. And it is right now. It is. It's a terrible season. It just got worse for you guys. I feel a little bit bad.
I don't. They've won 2 Super Bowls. I've won 9. Screw them.
They'll be all right.
Yeah, that's what I was telling you. It's like you won 2 Super Bowls, shouldn't have won. So you're good.
You'll be all right. All right. So we're going to step back here. And kind of, like I said, we're going to talk about some of the wide receivers now that were drafted rounds 2 through 4 this past draft season. Just kind of talking dynasty strategy here. We're not really focusing in on any one specific player here. We're just kind of looking at from a perspective, taking a step back, for future drafts. And so what I did is I went back and I took August ADP, kind of looked at where these wide receivers were getting drafted among other wide receivers and overall, and then compared that with their rank of where they're at fantasy-wise coming into week 9. The website I used, the data was not available with week 9 points added into it yet till after the Monday game, so I kind of had to improvise a little bit here. But okay, so top of the list here, the guys that I would say are underperforming, and we'll kind of circle back and spend just a minute or two on each guy because I think that every case is a little bit different here. Yep. But top of the list here, getting drafted at wide receiver 5 in August, 18 overall, and this is super flex data here, was Garrett Wilson. Coming into week 9, he's sitting at wide receiver 31. Obviously, we haven't seen him play tonight. I'm hoping he has it tonight. I am going into him in so many leagues. I need him to have like a 10-point game and just be done with it.
I expect Breece Hall tonight. So
my most important league I'm up by 39 against Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson. I'm like, just let them both have 19 each. And then I win by 1 point. Yeah. I know.
I think you'll be okay.
We'll be okay. We'll see. But then after Garrett Wilson here, wide receiver 8, pick 25 overall, was Jaylen Waddle. He's sitting at wide receiver 25 coming into the week. Only had 8.4 PPR points. As it sits now, was wide receiver 37 on the week. Wide receiver 9 in August was Chris Olave with an ADP of 29. He's sitting at wide receiver 27. He had a good week. Wide receiver 10 overall in the week so far with 16.5 PPR points. We had wide receiver 10, Devonta Smith. 36 overall. He's at wide receiver 23. Also had a pretty good week. He's sitting at wide receiver 14 with 14 points. T. Higgins, my guy, I highlighted on the Sunday Social yesterday. He was wide receiver 14 coming in, 40 overall, wide receiver 13 in draft season. Sitting clear down at wide receiver 59. He's sitting at wide receiver 8 on week 9 so far with 19 points. And the last two guys on this list here to wrap it up in Seattle, we had DK Metcalf and Jackson Smith and Jigba going back-to-back at wide receiver 14 and 15 at picks 42 and 43. And they are sitting, respectively, Metcalf at wide receiver 44, Smith and Jigba 58.
Smith went all the way up to that. That was his ADP in August?
Yeah, he was wide receiver 15 in August before he stepped on the field.
Crazy. God,
Yeah. It had a decent week this week, sitting at wide receiver 21 on the week for Smith and Jigba. But overall, here we got 7 guys. You could kind of add Drake London into this mix too. He was going wide receiver, I think 16 or 17, just a couple picks after these guys. His had a little bit of a disappointment, but it's more coaching there. But just overall here,
he's been better the last
he's been playing
games.
better.
Yeah,
he's been playing better. But you look at some of the other wide receivers drafted in the same area here. Amon-Ra St. Brown was going wide receiver 6. Tyreek Hill, wide receiver 7. Then you drop down a little bit. You have some vets here. You got Cooper Kupp at 11, Stephon Diggs at 12, Devontae Adams at 16. Just kind of taking a step back and just looking at all this together, what are kind of just like the overall lessons you think that are to be learned here, if there's really any at all, or if it's just kind of a fluke year, we've had a lot of underperforming here? Is it something where you're thinking maybe next year you're looking more at like the veterans, or do you think it's more of just like the true alpha ones are going to kind of separate themselves when the wide receiver 2 have those years closer? Just what are kind of your overall takeaways when you kind of, 9 weeks a day to now kind of get to see where we're at halfway through?
Yeah, I think we've talked about this before. I went to, kind of the no running back strategy 3 or 4 years ago, where I really it's rare I ever take a running back before the 6th round. I believe you got to get QBs and receivers. The other big rule that I have is with my wide receivers, they need to be the unquestioned number 1 receiver on their team. I just think it's so fluky. I mean, I've lived too much with the T. Higgins, the Devontae Smiths, the Jaylen Waddles. It's a roller coaster because, they're going to have these monster games, typically in the games where defenses are just we're not going to let the alpha receiver on your team go off. But it's just so inconsistent, and that's so maddening as a fantasy football owner. I mean, even if the points end up relatively close at the end of the year, I think it costs you more wins, right? Because when you have those games when one of your, top 4 players is scoring, 7 or less points in, 4 or 5 games a year, it's
looking at you, Jaylen Waddle.
Yeah, it's hard to win those games. So, I was huge on Amon-Ra St. Brown. He was my wide receiver number 4 this year. I just looked at his target volume last year, and the fact that the Lions didn't really have a second option yet, right? Even with Laporta becoming what he has, he'd still look at his volume. The one I'm mad about myself about is I let Tyreek Hill go by in way too many drafts. And honestly, shame on me. Shame on
him
me.
Talking about 3 years retiring, I think that scared a lot of people off. Even the most veteran dynasty player, here's 3 years, and it's kind of oh man, that's kind of scary.
The dude's he's the best receiver I've seen in my lifetime. I'm to the point now where
he's in that combo, yeah.
And him and Randy Moss are, to me, the 2 receivers that it's if I had one game and I knew I needed one guy to go out and make plays and make sure my offense can move, it would be unquestionably those 2 guys, and then obviously Jerry Rice, from the 80s. But
Megatron too.
Who, Megatron, but it's just man, it's something about Tyreek that he's done it in all these big moments, which honestly, even Moss has done it a few times in big moments. You look back, every big game Tyreek's ever played in, he still makes those big plays. It's just and I let that dude go by in way too many drafts. And I'm just so mad at myself because it was a layup. It was kind of shocking that he fell so far, not just in dynasty drafts, but in all drafts, to where you had some of these receivers above him. Garrett Wilson is a mulligan. It's just a bad situation. I hate we didn't get to see what, potentially could have been oh my God, Garrett Wilson may be one of the top 3 receivers in the league year, with them getting an upgrade at quarterback after what we saw last year. But the rest of them, to me, that's the big difference in this list is Jaylen Waddle, second receiver on a really good pass team, but second receiver. Devontae Smith, second receiver. I don't ever trust any Seattle receivers. Since the Metcalf Lockett thing, I can't deal with it. Exactly what we're talking about. It's you never know week to week who's going to score what. So I just don't mess with them.
And then here's a first-round rookie to throw in the mix.
That's why I'm that is insane. But you look at those guys below you're talking about. Amon, number 1 question wide receiver. Tyreek Hill, number 1 unquestioned wide receiver. Stephon Diggs, number 1 unquestioned wide receiver. Cooper Kupp, even with the emergence of Puka, look what Cooper has done because he's the unquestioned number 1 receiver. And then obviously Devontae Adams. Again, I know he's having a little bit of a down season, but he's still outscoring, I believe, Jacoby Myers overall, right?
It was close. I know it might be close, yeah.
But it's just that, to me, that's the difference in this range. And that is a rule, again, through just unfortunately making a mistake year after year in my own leagues that you can't have those number two guys. Like if they fall and it's a luxury, that's great. But like one of the big things I got away with this year, especially in my auction drafts, was getting Adam Thielen for nothing. Because again, he was a unquestioned number one receiver that like, it's a bad team. It's going to throw. I was like, DJ Shark's not going to beat out Adam Thielen.
I didn't buy into that one.
You know what I mean? And it's like, that's what you want, especially in PPR leagues, is who is going to get a 25% target share. And if it's a guy that's going to get that, man, they are so much more valuable to me, even than, like a T. Higgins, who's an unbelievable receiver, but Jamar Chase is going to get such a more significant amount of looks.
Yeah, I'm with you. I feel like my two big takeaways here is I'm not necessarily scared off of taking the wide receiver 2 on a team, but if the wide receiver 1 across from him is like a true alpha, like the AJ Brown, the Tyreek Hill level type guys, I think it's probably good to maybe knock around off their ADP. And if somebody else wants to jump up and grab them ahead of you, that's okay, because there's a good chance you're going to be able to get a vet like Tyreek Hill or Stephon Diggs around later. And that's kind of the other thing I think I would take away is, a lot of times in startups, you'll see guys, like the Diggs, Cups, Adams, Tyreeks that, in a redraft league are back of the first, second round players that go clear down round 4 and 5. And I think in startups next year, I think that like if a guy is a second round pick in redraft, I don't think I'm letting it fall past the third round in Dynasty. Even if it's an older player, you get it. You get to compete a little bit this year. And if it doesn't work out, like as we're seeing,
value, right? Like that's the thing is you can always trade it.
Adams, you can flip it. Even if you take a little bit of a loss, it's not like you're getting a zero back.
Yep.
And so I think those are two big adjustments I would say is, like if you're a true stud, like a top 3-4 round pick, like I'm not letting you go and probably a round past your redraft pick in Dynasty startups. And then, the number 2s, if I'm going to invest in them, like it's going to be probably more of like the DK Metcalfs, like the guys that don't have a true Jamar Chase, type guy across from them. Like we mentioned Garrett Wilson here. Weird.
I'm still very high on Olave. I think you are too, right? Because I think as Carr's arm gets stronger, he's going to continue to just. Yeah.
I'm Olave over Wilson personally, but they're really close there. But okay, so out of this list of guys here, let's just kind of go one by one here. Who, if you're saying bounce back or not, just kind of like your 15
this
seconds
year or overall. Are you talking about?
We'll do both. We'll say this year and beyond, kind of 15-second recap on him. So if Garrett Wilson, I'm going to say he doesn't really bounce back this year. I think it's a lost year, but next year bounce back.
I completely agree, especially if Rodgers is the QB. Yeah, like monster year.
Yeah. What about for Waddle?
I think as long as Tyreek's around, it is what it is. I mean, you look at his best season by far was his rookie year because there was no Tyreek Hill. So
he had like the record for receptions, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. Like he's that kind of guy. In a dynasty league, I understand not definitely wanting to hold on to him because Tyreek probably won't be around forever. Or if Waddle gets in a situation where he gets to be that alpha, he can definitely be it. But I kind of expect, better than what he is this year, I should say. He's having a down year, but I don't, see him being like a top 15 receiver next year either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that he is actually going to be a little bit better in the second half of this year. Like, I think that he finishes higher than the wide receiver 20, probably a little bit lower after this week. Probably close to like wide receiver 28, actually. And I think he finishes kind of in that top 24. So I'll give him a small bounce back. But I think that next year he's a guy, I agree with you that instead of being that round 2 or 3 guy who was this year, he's going to be more of that round 4 or 5 receiver. We'll see it drop down a little bit. So I'm with you. I think better in the second half this year. Overall, Dynasty outlook's a little bit down from where we were. Chris Olave, I'm up on him both second half and long term.
Me too. I'll give this. I'm sorry, I give the stat every time I talk about him, but when Aaron Rodgers was with Adams, 7 touchdowns for their entire time together, 40 yards or more. Carr in 1 season with Adams had 8 touchdowns of 40 yards or more. Olave is crazy. The ultimate deep threat, and you just got to remember his arm's been messed up. It does look healthier. That he's starting to throw it further and further down the field, and as that arm gets healthy, man, look out. Like Olave, I mean, look what he did with Andy Dalton last year, and I think we talked about this last time. No matter what you think about Carr, he is an upgrade on Andy Dalton. So.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Devonta Smith, so wide receiver 23 coming into the week, put up 14 points this week. I think that his arrow actually, unlike Waddle, is pointing up both this year and next year. I think that he's going to be better in the second half this year. I just think AJ Brown is going to be, he's having a historic year, and you're just going to have to deal with that. But if there's one guy on this list that you're telling me I got to put money on jumping back into the top 12 next year, it's going to be the guy that won the Heisman, a wide receiver, Devonta Smith. So I do think that he is a good buy target now for dynasty leagues, just because I think that he's going to return value in the second half. And then I do still think that he's going to be kind of that round 2-3 receiver in startups next year, just playing in that Eagles offense. Where you come in on that one?
For the rest of the year, I actually am kind of down on them. I just think it's going to be basically what you've seen, because the Eagles are about to hit a really difficult stretch of games. They're about to play some really good defenses. I believe they play, obviously they got another game with the Cowboys. They got the Chiefs. Like, they have some of the best defenses in the league coming up the next 6 games. So, and then the other thing is just, Smith is incredible, and in another situation, I think he could be one of the best receivers in the league. But I think AJ Brown is right now the best wide receiver in the league, and the Eagles have figured that out. And they're like, "Look, we're just going to throw it." He had the, I think, second highest target rate of any wide receiver for Week 9. So like, they're just basically now where it's like, "Look, he's our best player. We're going to try to get to him as much as possible." And unfortunately, that's really the only issue with Smith. He's just not getting the volume that he was last year.
Yeah, right now you look at AJ Brown and Tyreek Hill, the only players over 1,000 yards at the halfway point already. It's pretty crazy the run they're on this year. T. Higgins, I don't think I have to say too much. I'm up on him second half and long term, especially if by chance he can become a free agent and go somewhere where he's more that true number one. I think he would turn into that guy that's right underneath the CD, AJ Brown, Amon-Ra St. type guys if he got free to be a number one. Where are you at on Higgins there?
Yeah, we talked about it last time we got together. Higgins would be a guy I was trying to grab. Everybody, the sky was falling with Burrow and the Bengals. I'm like, guys, we've seen this before. Like, this is 3 years in a row. Like, just relax. He was banged up. We see now Burrow has torched. I know Buffalo's not really that good of a defense anymore, but he torched that San Francisco defense the week before. Better days are coming for Higgins. It's going to be a little frustrating because it is. That's just dealing with Higgins being the second guy. There's going to be games that he scores, 30 points and games he scores 5, but he's going to end up being a top 20.
Talent's there. For
he's
sure. So good.
And Burrow's so good, man.
Yeah. And then last two guys here to wrap it up here with the Seahawks receivers and DK Metcalf and Jackson Smith and Jigba. Man, this Seahawks offense is one I just can't quite get a good read on. Like, once I think they're bad, they have a few good weeks. Once I'm like, okay, they look good again, they have a week like they did this week. So if I had to put it down, I would say Metcalf is probably slightly up in the second half, but I don't think it's a big jump. Dynasty, I think that he's probably going to drop a little bit value-wise next year too. On the other hand, Smith and Jigba, I'm up on him in the second half and big time for year 2. What about you? How are you kind of approaching this group of wide receivers here in Seattle?
The rest of the year, I don't feel good about any of them. Seattle's offense is I hate it because the Geno story was so great, but it looks like, the clock struck midnight or something.
Yeah.
But going forward, DK is actually the guy I'm more excited about going forward just because of the talent. And if you look at the situation, again, this is no offense to Geno, but it's not like he's a stud quarterback. I think the Seahawks are going to do something with one of these receivers. I don't understand why they would come back again with Lockett, Smith, and Metcalf. And so if they get rid of, say they got rid of Metcalf, say that's probably the one they get the most value for. He could end up in an unbelievable situation. We don't know where that is.
Right.
But even if they just get rid of Lockett, then both of them are obviously much more valuable because now you got an extra 3.5, 4 targets per game going to each of them. And both of those guys are ultra talented. I just love Metcalf because of his size. I know the last, 23 games, he hadn't had the touchdown rate that he did his first couple years of his career, but he was a lot like AJ Brown that he didn't have a ton of receptions week to week, but he put up a lot of yards and a lot of touchdowns. And I think he can get back to that. It's just been QB play that's kind of been hindering him.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Awesome, man. Well, that wraps up everything I had today. This was a lot of fun. It's kind of nice to be able to step back and kind of have more of the philosophical discussions on this sometimes, it's kind of fun to do here. Like I said, I was very excited to get your thoughts on the Falcons. It was just interesting timing for all this to happen. But what do you got coming up here? Where can they find you?
Well, most importantly, we're going to Vegas Wednesday, so it's going to be a fun week for me and my dad and my boys. We go out and play in a golf tournament every year there, so we'll play some poker. Okay. Check out the Spear, which I'm actually really excited about. But
I've never been to Vegas, though.
What? Oh, dude!
I know.
Next year we need to do a fantasy 6-pack trip, then, dude. Especially with you being in Oregon. How far would it be for you to Vegas?
Not long. I mean, I could drive there probably in a day, and I could fly there in a couple hours.
Yeah, we'll talk offline. But this week I've got I'm gonna get hopefully the DFS values article out before I leave Wednesday. We probably will have to change the day of the show. I know we always do the DFS kickoff show on Thursdays. I'll be at the Spear Thursday, so I think I'm gonna talk to Joe Matz.
Live show from the Spear.
Yeah, man. Oh, I don't know if they allow that. I'll probably get kicked out in 5 seconds, but I got to talk to Joe to make sure what day. But we'll either record it or just go live on a different night. And then we have DFS Stacks article that comes out later in the week, and then be sure on ESPN Northwest Florida every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Central. I go on and we talk DFS for about 40 minutes, 2 segments, and it's a lot of fun. You should definitely, if you're not following them on Twitter, it's ESPN PC 1043. And also, I'd appreciate if you follow me on Twitter at Keith Flemming, where I give a lot of DFS, advice,
constantly,
articles and stuff. Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, again, appreciate you for coming on here today.
Oh, I love chopping up with you, man.
Yeah, man, this is fun. So for me, I will not be on the Sunday social this Sunday. I will be finishing our last golf trip of the year. Hopefully, weather permitting, get a couple of good days of golf in before the winter. I will still have my weekly written recap coming out Monday morning. I'll head back to the Airbnb that night and finish her up. So I'll still have that out. If you haven't checked out Week 9's recap, that's live on the site right now.
It is free content. First thing I do every Monday, man.
I feel like I kind of literally it's kind of cheesy, but I feel like I've really hit mid-season form on that article these last 2 weeks. I came away from this one. I kind of when I did my final edit, step back. I was like, damn, I think this is the best recap I've written on any of the weeks so far. So I'm getting into mid-season here. Yep. But yeah, so you'll still have that next week. No Sunday social. Questionable on if we will have a Dynasty show next week. I will be traveling back Monday. I'm hoping to get back early enough to record it. But if not, we may have 1 week off of this show, but then the following week we're back to normal Sunday, Monday shows. Of course, I have my Dynasty ranks up on the site. But yeah, just follow Fantasy 6-Pack on YouTube and become a member. You'll see everything that I do. It's all through there right now. Again, Keith, appreciate you coming on, and for everyone that tuned in, thank you for watching, and we'll talk to you guys next week.